Next, we will have SSDN to walk us through local programs.
All right, so as Stacy mentioned, we're going to take like the next 45 minutes or so to talk about local programs. But before we do we need like a 5-minute like bathroom break or anything? I know I took a bathroom break, but are we good? Okay. So we're going to start off with Cassie. She's going to talk about ownership models for charging. So welcome, Cassie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Cordova. I'm the Sustainability Manager for the City of Clearwater. So I was told this was just a very informal, brief, it's not really a presentation, it's just me talking. So just a little bit of background on the City of Clearwater and where we are with our EV fleet transition. We had put in place a policy, an alternative fuel vehicle policy, back, I think, around 2018, before my time, before Melody's time, and it said that we would transition 100% of our light-duty vehicles to alternatively fueled vehicles by 2040, and to do so, that meant all purchases after 2028 needed to be alternatively fueled vehicles. So not necessarily EVs, but hybrid or some other technology. So that was on the books for a while. When I came in, it was one of the things that I was kind of, our director at the time had been directed from the city manager to come up with this plan, right? We have a policy, how are we going to implement it? And so our city manager had directed us to build a tool to kind of evaluate the cost of what would be, what's the return on investment, what's the best option financially. So she had envisioned us literally building like an Excel tool. And I kindly informed her that those tools already exist, and there are several of them. So I gave them a list, the Drive tool, the A-Fleet, there was a bunch of them. And so we kind of went back and forth on that for a while. Not a whole lot happened. As you all know, we do 50 million things at once. But then we did get the EECBG funding, and so we used that funding to purchase our first 4 EV vehicles, because that funding was pretty broad, and basically at that time we had no department, and so we were with our city manager, and she said, well, what do you guys want to do with the money? And we said, well, we'd like to buy some EVs, because we don't know when we're ever going to be able to do that, so can we just please buy 4 EVs with this money, and they're free, and then that's our return on investment. They were totally free. So we did that, but then there's also the question of how you're going to charge these EVs, right? That's whenever we try to talk about it. Our previous fleet manager, he was pretty receptive to the idea. Theoretically, he was not, he was older, but he was on board, but he was also very hesitant. How are we going to actually do this? Especially, unfortunately, our fleet building itself does not have the transformer capacity to add any chargers. So how are we going to have vehicles that need to be charged while they're being worked on when we can't put a charger there? And then a side note on the charging side, we did put some public chargers in a parking garage downtown, just 2 Blink chargers. I'm not exactly sure why we chose Blink, but that's what we chose. Not to diss Blink. Well, I am going to diss Blink, but I don't know why Blink was chosen, but that's what they chose. And then when we opened up our Coachman Park, which was our big multi-million-dollar park, we put in 3 more Blink chargers that way. And we can order the Blink chargers through the Sourcewell contract, so we don't have to competitively bid that out. So we have 5 public EV chargers. The 2 that are in the parking garage have been fine. Unfortunately, the 3 that we installed in our park are, as was mentioned earlier, they are very exposed to the elements. They've been in, pretty much they went in right around the time I started, about 2.5, 3 years ago, and actually, no, there's 4 there, and I think all 4 have broken always. They're always broken. And so our parking team, our parking division is in Public Works, and we are also now eventually in Public Works. And it's just a nightmare. There are emails constantly. This one's broken, the credit card screen's broken, this is cracked, there's condensation. Our parking team generally handles it, but we also are like more Melody liaisons with Blink. And it's just kind of a disaster. Even though they're supposed to be graded for hurricane, wind, whatever, they can't handle the heat. But anyways, moving forward, we, as you probably all know, I get at least probably one email a week saying, hey, we're blah, blah, blah company. We have these EV chargers. We're different because we do this, this, this. And by the way, we're on some competitively collective bargaining agreement. So you can just order our EV chargers. And we get them all the time. Melody gets them, our parking manager gets them, everybody gets them, and there are dozens and dozens of companies out there to choose from. And so we know the future, we know we need to put more chargers in, especially now that we have our chargers coming. But we just don't know what to do because everything is on these collective bargaining agreements. And they all tell us they're the best. But I am not an expert in EV chargers. So finally we convinced our parking division, let's just put out an RFP because we want to see apples to apples. So we put out an RFP, which we basically just copied somebody else's. So yeah, it's all we ever do. But basically at that point, what we wanted to ask for was obviously cost was a factor, utilization. We wanted to ensure equity and access because many of you may be familiar with Clearwater Beach, but Clearwater Beach is a barrier island, and we get millions and millions of visitors a year, but then we have the rest of mainland Clearwater, so we don't want a company that's just going to come in and put 10 chargers on the beach and forget about the rest of our city. We want somebody that's going to be equitable, that's going to come in, put chargers at our libraries, at our rec centers, at our city hall. And then we want, as was mentioned also, the OCPP, we wanted them to be open. We knew for a fact we wanted it to make sure that they were open since we know so many of these EV companies come and go, and then you're left with these defunct chargers. As we were kind of going through building the RFP, we stumbled upon this idea. So traditionally, it's the city-owned EV chargers. We buy them, and then we keep the revenue minus I think 8% is what Blink keeps for processing. But then we kind of figured out there's this other model, which is the vendor own and operate. And I think we had already published the RFP, and the RFP we didn't really specify, but then we started getting questions back, and because I think one company was like, well, which model do you want? And we were like, well, can you give us both? So then we got 13 responses to our RFP, which I thought was kind of a lot. And then we picked, I believe it was the top 5 to ask for presentations from. And then when we asked for presentations, we gave them all the same set of questions. And one of those questions was, do you have a vendor own and operate model? And turns out they all had vendor own and operate models, which I was not aware of. That was really an option. So we went through and we went with EV Gateway, which is a company out of California. Unfortunately, we haven't had a lot of progress since then. So as I told Dory, I don't have a lot of success since then. But just overall, I know, my goal is to get as many EVs and as many EV chargers into the city of Clearwater. We do not have a lot of political support for that at the moment. So when I kind of discovered this option that we can give a company basically domain and say, you have the city of Clearwater, put chargers wherever you want. Not only do we not have to then pay for them, we also don't have to assume the risk, right? As you know, we had the hurricanes last year. We didn't lose any chargers, but we lost over 100, I think, of our parking meters. And we had to replace all those parking meters, and that cost a lot of money. So with similar, we wouldn't want to have all these chargers and then a storm come in and destroy them all, and then us have to pay them. So we really liked the idea of having the vendor own and operate, and also just the staff time. the amount of staff time that we have dealt with, just 6 chargers, I'm talking, and it's probably weekly, there's something going on with it. Melody mostly works on it, and it's just, we don't want to be in the EV charger business. We've figured that out, but we want chargers in the city of Clearwater, and we don't have any we have very few. We have like 1 Wawa. We don't have a lot of private chargers, so we want the chargers there. We want our citizens to have access, but we don't necessarily want to be doing it. So I think that was all that I had. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Cassie. Let's give her a round of applause.